They say a mother's love is the most powerful force in the world, and for Queen Elizabeth II, that love was often focused on her son, Prince Andrew. We all remember our Queen with deep respect. She was a symbol of grace and duty that we truly loved from the bottom of our hearts. But today, the royal family is facing a dark shadow. With the shocking release of the Epstein files and the news of Andrew's recent arrest in February 2026, the world is left wondering, how did the Queen's favourite son fall so far? Behind the guarded walls of the palace, the Queen tried her best to keep her family grounded through the simple tradition of sharing a meal. She personally looked after Andrew, ensuring his favourite dishes were always ready. But while the Queen was serving him with love, Andrew was living a life of luxury that has now led him to a prison cell. It is heartbreaking to think of the pain this would have caused our beloved Queen. To understand the man behind the headlines, we have to look at his private life, starting with the food he demanded at the royal table. From expensive steaks to simple snacks, these 10 dishes reveal the life of a prince who had everything, but lost it all. Dish number 1, the midnight ribeye steak. For most of the royal family, the dining schedule was as immovable as the stone walls of Windsor Castle. Dinner was served at a precise time, and once the kitchens were cleaned and the staff dismissed, the culinary day was over. But Prince Andrew lived by a different set of rules. Known as the Queen's favourite son, he often felt entitled to the luxuries of the palace at any hour of the day or night. One of his most famous and demanding habits was his love for a midnight ribeye steak. According to former palace staff, it wasn't unusual for the kitchens to be jolted back to life at 2 a.m. because the prince had a sudden craving. This wasn't just a quick sandwich. He demanded a high-quality, rare-cooked ribeye steak, prepared with the same precision as a state banquet. For the chefs and under-butlers, this meant reopening the industrial kitchens, heating the grills, and preparing a full gourmet meal while the rest of the world and the Queen were fast asleep. This habit became a symbol of his reputation for being difficult and demanding. While his siblings, like King Charles, were known to be more conscious of the staff's workload, Andrew reportedly saw it as his royal right to be served whenever he pleased. It highlights the vast difference between the disciplined life of Queen Elizabeth and the indulgent lifestyle Andrew chose to lead. Today, as he faces the reality of a prison cell following the 2026 investigations, the luxury of a 2 a.m. steak seems like a ghost from a past life. The man who once had a staff of world-class chefs at his beck and call now finds himself at the mercy of a very different, much humbler menu.
Question: have you ever stayed up late because you were hungry?
What is your favourite midnight snack that you just can't resist?
Dish number 2.
Orange-infused creme brulee. If there was one dish that perfectly captured Prince Andrew's expensive and sometimes stubborn taste, it was his beloved orange-infused creme brulee. This wasn't just any ordinary dessert. It was a delicate, creamy masterpiece that required a very specific ingredient to meet the prince's standards. Andrew reportedly insisted that the oranges used to flavour the custard must be sourced directly from the Queen's private Sandringham estate. He believed that only these royal oranges provided the correct level of sweetness and zest. Palace insiders have shared stories of how Andrew would become visibly frustrated if the flavour didn't match his expectations. If a chef tried to use regular store-bought oranges, the prince would often notice and send the dish back to the kitchen, demanding it be made properly. This obsession with a single ingredient showed a man who was used to getting exactly what he wanted, no matter how much extra effort it required from those serving him. It makes you wonder, do you get hangry or annoyed when your food doesn't taste exactly the way you expected, or are you easy to please? For Andrew, this dessert was a symbol of his status, a sweet reminder that as the Queen's favourite, the best of the land was reserved for him. Dish number 3. Spicy lamb curry. Prince Andrew's palate was far more adventurous than the traditional meat and potatoes diet, often associated with the British royals. His years travelling the globe as a trade envoy introduced him to bold flavours, leading to a deep obsession with spicy lamb curry. He loved the heat of the chilies and the richness of a slow-cooked masala. However, these curry nights now carry a much darker tone. Many of the connections he made over these exotic dinners soften with controversial figures in far-off Lancashire, the very things being scrutinised in the Epstein files today. While the Queen saw these meals as a way for her son to relax after work, investigators now look at them as moments where private interests and royal status may have blurred. It is a sharp contrast, a prince enjoying the finest spices of the East, while allegedly involving himself in scandals that would eventually lead to his 2026 arrest. Thinking about your own kitchen, who makes the best curry in your house? Is it your mom, your dad, or do you have a secret recipe of your own? For Andrew, the spice was a luxury he felt he deserved, but it eventually led him into a heat he couldn't handle. Dish number 4, the perfect eggs Benedict for Prince Andrew. Breakfast was never a casual affair, it was a test of precision. His morning of choice was always a classic eggs Benedict, but it had to be prepared to an exacting, almost impossible standard. He was notoriously obsessed with the runniness of the yolk and the thickness of the hollandaise sauce. If the egg was a second overcooked or the sauce had even a tiny lump, the prince would not hesitate to point it out to the kitchen staff. He wanted his world to be perfectly controlled, starting with the very first bite of his day. This demand for perfection in the kitchen sat in stark contrast to the growing chaos of his private life. While he was busy worrying about the consistency of a breakfast sauce, the walls were slowly closing in on his royal career. It's a fascinating look at a man who focused so much energy on small, trivial details while the bigger picture was falling apart. It makes one think about our own morning routines and how we handle the start of the day. How do you like your eggs in the morning, fried, boiled, or a simple omeletined? Does it ruin your day if they aren't cooked just right? For Andrew, a perfect egg was a requirement of his status, but no amount of perfection at the breakfast table could save him from the legal storm that was coming. Dish number 5, smoked salmon sandwiches for Prince Andrew. Smoked salmon sandwiches were more than just a light snack, they were a direct link to his childhood and the unconditional love of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. During the sacred ritual of afternoon tea, the Queen always ensured that these delicate, crustless sandwiches were available specifically for her favourite son. The salmon was often sourced from the cold waters of the River Dee at Balmoral, representing the very best of British heritage. It was in these quiet moments, over tea in silver trays, that the Queen reportedly felt most protective of Andrew, shielding him from the growing whispers of the outside world. Even as the scandals began to break, the tradition of the salmon sandwich remained a constant in their private meetings. It symbolizes a mother's desire to keep her child little, even when the world sees a very different man. It's a powerful reminder of how food can transport us back to a time of safety and innocence. Is there a special food or a specific snack that always reminds you of your childhood or your mother's cooking whenever you taste it? For Andrew, these sandwiches were a comfort, but they also highlight the tragic reality that even the most powerful mother's love couldn't protect him from the consequences of his own choices. Dish number 6, venison pie, the hunter's meal. As a man who spent much of his life on the sprawling royal estates of Sandringham and Balmoral, Prince Andrew developed a rugged appetite for the hunter's meal, specifically a rich venison pie. He took great pride in the tradition of the royal hunt, often participating in the stalking of deer across the Scottish Highlands. This heavy, savoury pie, filled with slow-cooked meat and a thick golden pastry crust, was his ultimate reward after a long day in the cold. It was a dish that celebrated his status as a traditional royal Malone who mastered the land and enjoyed its bounty. However, there is a deep irony in this favourite meal today. The man who once enjoyed the thrill of the hunt, pursuing prey across the hills, is now the one being hunted by the global legal system. Following his arrest in February 2026, the power he once felt as a master of the estate has completely vanished. The heavy, meat-filled dishes he loved are a far cry from the disciplined, lighter meals favoured by his brother, King Charles. Thinking about your own preferences, do you prefer a simple vegetable dish for dinner, or are you a meat lover who needs chicken or beef to feel truly satisfied? For Andrew, the venison pie was a taste of power, a power that has now been stripped away. Dish number 7, traditional fish and chips. Even a prince with the most expensive tastes sometimes craves a common British classic, and for Andrew that was traditional fish and chips. However, true to his royal status, he didn't experience this meal like the rest of us. He wouldn't be found standing in a queue at a local chippy or eating out of greasy newspaper on a cold evening. Instead, Andrew wanted his fish and chips prepared by world-class chefs inside the luxury of the palace. He wanted the flaky white fish and the perfect golden batter, but he wanted it served on fine china with silver cutlery. It was his way of enjoying street food without ever having to leave his ivory tower or mingle with the public. This choice reveals a lot about his personality, a man who wanted to feel connected to normal British life, but only on his own terms and from a safe distance. He enjoyed the culture of the people he represented, but he never truly stepped into their world. As he now adapts to the very different reality of a prison menu following his 2026 arrest, that distance has finally vanished. It makes you wonder about the simple joys we often take for granted. If you could have a professional, world-class chef cook any street food or favorite local snack for you right now, what would you choose? For Andrew, the palace version of fish and chips was a luxury, but now he is finally experiencing life without the silver platter. Dish number 8. Rich chocolate fudge cake. Behind the headlines of scandal and the stern face of royal duty, Prince Andrew had one undeniable weakness: a massive sweet tooth, especially for a rich chocolate fudge cake. This wasn't a light, airy sponge, it was a dense, dark, and indulgent masterpiece that Andrew reportedly turned to during times of high stress. While he was a complicated and often criticized royal, those close to the family say he was a devoted father. He loved sharing a thick slice of this decadent cake with his daughters, Princesses Beatrice and Eugenie, during private family celebrations. In these moments, he wasn't a duke or a diplomat, he was just a father enjoying a treat with his children. However, as we look back at these sweet family memories through the lens of the Epstein files and his 2026 arrest, it becomes difficult to reconcile the two versions of the man. It raises a deep and uncomfortable question for all of us. Can we separate Andrew the father from Andrew the man in the headlines? And if you had to choose one forever, would you pick chocolate cake or vanilla cake? For Andrew, the fudge cake was a source of comfort and a way to bond with his family, but even the sweetest indulgence couldn't mask the bitterness of the legal battle that would eventually change his life forever. Dish number 9. Roast chicken with lemon. The Sunday roast is a sacred tradition for the British people, and the royal family is no exception. For Prince Andrew, the centerpiece of these family gatherings was often a roast chicken with lemon and thyme. But even during a relaxed family lunch, Andrew's competitive and territorial nature would often shine through. Palace insiders have noted that he was always very particular about getting his favorite cut, specifically the drumsticks, and he made sure he was served before anyone else at the table. While his mother, Queen Elizabeth, was known for her others-first attitude, Andrew's behavior at the dinner table often mirrored his approach to royal life, taking what he wanted when he wanted it. This small habit of grabbing the best pieces first might seem minor, but it reflects a man who grew up believing that the best of everything belonged to him by right. Now, as he faces the consequences of his actions in a prison cell, that sense of entitlement has been met with a harsh reality. It's a moment that makes us look at our own family dinners and how we share with those we love. When your family sits down for a chicken dinner, which part do you always try to grab first, the juicy leg or the breast, and are you willing to fight for it? For Andrew, the Sunday roast was a display of his position, but no amount of royal status could keep the seat at the head of the table forever.
Dish number 10.
Afternoon tea. Scones. In the world of British royalty, nothing is more sacred than the ritual of afternoon tea, and for Prince Andrew, this meant a plate of perfectly baked scones. He was famously strict about how they were served, insisting on the Devonshire method: clotted cream first, then jam. But more than the food, Andrew was obsessed with the protocol that came with it. Even during a casual tea, he reportedly demanded that staff and guests treat him with the highest level of formality, ensuring he was addressed as Sir at all times. It is a striking irony that a man who was so rigid about the rules of royal etiquette is now accused of breaking the most serious laws of society. For years, the clinking of teacups and the luxury of the palace shielded him from the consequences of his private life. However, following his arrest in February 2026, the HRH title is gone, and the silver tea service has been replaced by a plastic tray. The man who once lived for the respect of his title is now facing a future behind bars where protocol no longer exists. It forces us to ask a very serious question about justice and status. Now that Andrew is in jail and stripped of his titles, do you think people should still call him Sir or Prince, or is he just a normal man now? For Andrew, the era of tea and scones is over, leaving behind a legacy that even the most royal tradition cannot fix. As the golden chandeliers of Buckingham Palace dim and the silver platters are cleared away for the final time, the story of Prince Andrew's favourite dishes leaves us with a bittersweet taste. We began this journey remembering the grace and warmth of Queen Elizabeth II, a mother who used these very meals to show love to a son she truly cherished. But the transition from the finest midnight steaks in a royal kitchen to a simple plastic tray in a prison cell is a fall from grace that the world never expected. It is a powerful reminder that while royalty might be born into privilege, they are ultimately judged by their character and their choices. The palace walls that once echoed with the demands of a prince are now silent, and the favourite son faces a reality far away from the comforts of Sandringham and Balmoral. As we close this chapter of royal history, we are left to wonder about the true meaning of justice and the heavy price of a legacy lost. If you could sit across the table from Prince Andrew today and ask him just one question about his past, what would it be? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to like and subscribe as we continue to follow this unfolding royal drama.